ADHD, or Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, is one of the most significant neurodevelopmental disorders in children. It is consistently observed in children across different parts of the world, and it commonly persists into adulthood. Understanding and accommodating for children with ADHD is essential to their mental well-being and success in school, and it should be taken seriously. They are often written off as problem children or have other negative labels attached to them instead of being treated adequately for their symptoms. ADHD is primarily biologically caused by dysfunction in dopamine neurotransmitter transport and reception across the brain, as well as impaired communication between the prefrontal cortex, the cerebellum, and the striatum and pallium regions of the basal ganglia. The dopamine neurotransmitter is the primary modulator between these regions of the brain. An impairment causes the telltale symptoms of ADHD, including inattention, impulsivity, and hyperactivity. Symptoms such as these are typically more prominent in children due to undeveloped brain regions, and as such, certain symptoms, particularly those related to hyperactivity, can decrease as a person ages. There are two primary theories for the biological component of ADHD: top-down and bottom-up. These propose different structures of the brain have primary role in the development of ADHD. The top-down theory implicates the frontal, prefrontal, and sagittal cortices. The bottom-up theory focuses on the subcortical regions of the brain, including the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the reticular activating systems. Children with ADHD often greatly struggle with cognitive dysregulation, in which it is very difficult to control their attention and behaviors. They are able to maintain attention, but unable to easily regulate it. If a task is repetitive, uninteresting, or stressful, they will likely struggle greatly with maintaining consistent attention, especially if there's something more interesting that they would rather do. Another aspect of cognitive dysregulation is inhibition control. A child with ADHD may struggle with staying on task, instead opting to do something more interesting. They might make impulsive decisions without thinking about the long-term consequences. Common experiences a child with ADHD may have include hyperfixation and hyperfocus. Hyperfixations occur when a person becomes entirely engrossed in a certain thing, whether that be a hobby, a piece of media, or something else. A person is often distracted by their hyperfixation, almost constantly thinking about it or participating in it. In contrast, a hyperfocus is more specific, where a person is engrossed in a specific task or behavior, finding no trouble focusing on it at all, unlike other tasks at hand. These behaviors relate to behavioral inhibition control, which is often extremely difficult to pull attention away from a hyperfixation or a hyperfocus. A child's interaction with their parents play a large role in developing ADHD. Specific patterns in a parent's behavior can influence the child's developmental processes, such through vicarious learning, where a child observes and replicates behaviors from their parents. ADHD parents are more likely to pass their traits onto their kids through inconsistent parental monitoring, unconstructive parental techniques, and lax discipline. Children with ADHD often struggle academically. In very young children, they are observed to have difficulties in school starting in kindergarten or pre-kindergarten. They are often seen to fall behind their peers in learning basic math, spelling, and other subjects. This is partly due to inattention. Children are often observed as zoning out or staring into space, unable to properly focus on the lesson. Long-term inattention will cause them to fall behind, which can last long into adolescence and adulthood. Girls are generally observed to be less impaired in this aspect than boys. Symptoms of ADHD can cause social isolation of children, starting at a very young age. They have an increased likelihood of experiencing negative interactions from their teachers, parents, and their peers. Children with ADHD receive more corrections, punishments, and criticisms than their peers, which can cause long-term rejection sensitivity. This is characterized by emotional overreactions and anxiety related to perceived or actual instances of rebuke from those around them. Children with ADHD are observed to have deficits in the personality dimensions of activity regulation, executive function, cognition, language, and emotional regulation. They are often observed to excel in the dimensions of introversion and sociability. Due to the higher likelihood of consistent rejection from their peers, it's no surprise that children with ADHD are more likely to form negative associations with social interaction. They are more likely to develop mood and anxiety disorders than their peers and often exhibit a low self-esteem. It's common to experience strong beliefs that one is a failure or a loser, as well as guilt or shame for experiencing their difficulties. Fearfulness and apprehension about social interaction increases the risk of developing social anxiety. Pervasive self-esteem and social issues can lead to a strong feeling of hopelessness and worthlessness, which can exacerbate the potential development of mood disorders such as major depressive disorder. ADHD is characterized by inattention, impulsivity, and hyperactivity, which exists to a point where they impair one's performance in school, work, and personal relationships. Inattention is characterized as issues remaining on task, maintaining focus, and maintaining organization. Impulsivity is characterized as a lack of restraint and proclivity towards rash and risk-taking behaviors. Hyperactivity is characterized by excessive fidgeting or moving, blurting out words, and the inability to wait one's turn. Difficulty sleeping is also observed due to the inability to relax oneself. Symptoms of hyperactivity commonly diminish in prevalence as a person ages. Genetics account for 80% of symptoms experienced by children with ADHD. The C4b component locus on the MHC gene of chromosome 6 is believed to play a large part in the genetic heritability of ADHD. Dysfunction of this gene causes dysregulation of dopamine due to its association with transporters in the D4 receptor. Dopamine's role in ADHD accounts for the success of dopaminergic drugs such as amphetamines. Common experiences a child living with ADHD may have is frustration with not being able to keep up with their peers academically, feelings of social isolation and rejection, which may lead to self-esteem issues and social anxiety. Children with ADHD often have issues keeping a schedule and are commonly late, which can lead to embarrassment. Excessive restlessness, fidgeting, and overall inability to stay still are common experiences. Boys are 3 times more likely to receive an ADHD diagnosis than girls, which is partially because boys are more likely to experience overt symptoms. Dopaminergic drugs such as methylphenidate, amphetamines, and pamelanes are psychostimulants and the most common drugs used to treat ADHD. They increase the availability of dopamine in the brain. Removing artificial colors and preservatives can also help with small children and their ADHD symptoms, but they don't completely remove them. Non-stimulants are also available for people who experience anxiety issues, but they're typically not as effective as stimulants, but they work for a little bit longer. Behavioral therapy and parental training are some of the most important skills for young children with ADHD. Behavioral therapy can increase self-regulation skills. It can give coping strategies towards improving their behavior. And parents can learn their techniques to help their children, such as routines, organization, distraction management, and assistance in planning.